Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the meeting of the Development Committee. Could I ask everyone to note the fire instructions? There are no planned fire drills tonight. If, however, the fire alarm goes off, please use the fire exit through the main doors of the hall or the fire exit in the storeroom adjacent to the stage. The fire assembly point is the island in front of the main entrance to the building. Please do not delay your evacuation to collect any belongings. Please do not return to the building until given permission to do so by council staff. I would also like to remind you, please switch off your mobile phones, turn them to silent. Please note that the meeting will be live streamed where the proceedings are capable of repeated viewing. Please ensure your microphone is switched on when speaking and you speak clearly into the microphone. Once finished speaking, can you please switch off your microphone to avoid feedback noise? If you're seated in the public area of the chamber, it's likely that your image will be captured by the recording cameras and result in your image being part of the broadcast. If members are for any reason not present for the whole debate on an item, you will not be allowed to vote on that item. May I remind members to declare any interest and the nature of the interest at the beginning of an agenda item, and that on declaring a pecuniary interest, you are required to leave the room when that item of business is considered. Item 1, apologies for absence and substitute. Apologies received from Councillor Myers, substitute Councillor Hoy. Apologies received from Councillor O'Leary, substitute Councillor Cross. None members attending? None. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of June 2024. Are these agreed? Item 4, to receive declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Mrs. Elshaw.
Thank you. I'm a ward councillor, non-pecuniary interest. I'm a ward councillor for Roach North and Rural, and I'm also an Essex County councillor. Thank you.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. I'm a ward councillor for item 7. Roach North and Rural.
Okay. Item 5, items referred from the weekly list. There are none. Item 6, 2400313 REM, land east of Ashington Road and north of Rochford Garden Way, Rochford. Katie Rogers will present the report.
Thank you. So members, this application relates to land which forms part of a wider site which extends east of Ashington Road, where my light pen is there, between Rochford Garden Way to the south here and Oxford Road to the north. Phase 1, which is in the southwestern corner, already benefits from full planning permission. An outline planning permission has been granted for phases 3 and 2. Reserved matters approval has also been granted in respect of all of phase 3 to the north here and this part of phase 2, which we'll call 2A. The red line on this plan, which I'll just point out with the cursor for those that struggle to differentiate the red and the blue, is around here. So the southern boundary of the application site that we're looking at this evening borders some properties with gardens on Rochford Garden Way to the south. Part of the eastern boundary of this phase 2B area borders what will become the Eastern Parkland, so this strategic open space as part of the development. And this part of the boundary here borders what will be a sustainable urban drainage attenuation basin as part of the surface water drainage scheme for the wider site. Sorry. So this application seeks approval of details of scale, appearance and landscaping which were not considered at the outline planning stage in relation to phase 2B. In terms of scale, this plan shows the precise length and width of each building proposed. This plan on the screen is the storey heights plan. So in terms of height, the buildings proposed would be a mix of single storey, that's the buildings shown in the yellow, they're garages, 2-storey, which is all the buildings shown orange, and this light purple colour, these are the buildings that would be 2.5-storey. The precise height of each building has been provided on the submitted elevation plans, and you can see that the majority of the buildings on the site will be 2-storey. 3 street scenes are shown on this plan, and the scale of buildings is considered to be in keeping with the development that has been approved in phase 1 and within phases 2A and 3. It is also considered to be in keeping with the scale of the development in the vicinity of the wider site. These street scenes also give a flavour of the architectural style of the buildings proposed, which would be traditional, with pitched tiled roofs. You can see that some of the roofs are gable-ended, some are hipped. Variety of appearance would be achieved through different architectural detailings. So on some of them, you can see this kind of mock Tudor boarding. Different porch designs. So if I just zoom in slightly, hopefully you can see here, you've got some porch designs with this like canopy, sloping roofed canopy. You've got some flat roof porch designs here, and you've got these little arched ones over here. And different external facing materials, including the use of render and different coloured brickwork. In terms of visual impression that the proposed development will make in the street, the proposal is considered acceptable. Take you back to the layout plan. So one of the key considerations is the acceptability of the proposal in terms of the impact on the residential amenity of occupants of existing nearby dwellings. And in this case, the dwellings that exist near to the site are these ones on Rochford Garden Way to the south. The proposal has been assessed in terms of the relationship that would result between these dwellings and the proposed dwellings, taking into account existing planning policy and guidance in the supplementary planning documents and Essex Design Guide. We've taken account of the scale of the development, so the heights and the separation distances between the proposed dwellings and the existing, and also the placement of windows in terms of any potential for overlooking. And taking account of these things, it's been concluded that no unreasonable loss of privacy or excessive overshadowing would result to occupants of existing nearby dwellings. So on this plan again, if I just zoom in a little bit. So landscaping is also a matter for determination, and this requires consideration of the proposed treatment of land, including surfacing materials to roads, boundary treatments and soft landscaping, including the provision of street trees. And the layout plan shows some of the detail of soft landscaping. So you can see some of the street trees that would be provided between parking bays in this street here. Additionally, you'd have some trees planted to rear gardens, if you can see these light green circles here. And then the other landscaping that's proposed within this phase 2B area is on plot landscaping to the site frontages, so the small areas to the front of each dwelling and sometimes to the side, and then rear gardens would generally. A planning condition recommended to require detailed planting plans, including details of planting method, to ensure that street trees can grow without conflict with nearby hard surfaces. A number of different boundary treatments are proposed, so closed boarded fencing would feature between rear garden boundaries, and then on corner plots where the boundary treatment would be more visible to the street scene, these would be formed of brick walls. So where my light pen is indicating, for example, to those sorts of corner plots. I'll just take you to the, so finally, in terms of landscaping, this is the hard surfacing plan. So the hard surfacing treatment to roads would be consistent with what's already been approved in other phases of the wider site. So tarmac to the streets, but these raised tables here would be formed of a contrasting block paving. And some of the visitor parking bays along Eastern Parkland would also be block paved. And then there'd be the parking bays here would be tarmac, and some of these treated with a slightly different tarmac with grey chipping to give a bit of contrast. So overall, the proposed landscaping of the site is considered acceptable for the reasons set out in the committee report. So in conclusion, this application is limited in its scope and focuses on the consideration of the acceptability of the submitted details of scale, landscaping and appearance relating to the residential development that's already been approved by virtue of the outline permission. Details of the scale landscaping all contribute to how the character of a place is developed and how the overall development would be experienced. The clear policy objective being that good design is achieved to result in a place which is visually pleasing and functions well. The submitted details have been assessed in relation to the relevant planning policy and guidance, and the recommendation is one of approval for the reasons given in the published report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Katie. There is one public speaker for this application. Mr. Atmere, would you like to speak in support of the application? Thank you, Mr. Atmere. Are you au with the communications? Excellent. You have 5 minutes to speak.
Good evening, members. As stated by the Chair, my name is Craig Atmere and I am the Design and Planning Lead and working for Bloor Homes. First and foremost, I want to acknowledge the Planning Officer's thorough and diligent review of the submission, clearly evident in their report. Their thorough assessment reflects a commitment to good planning that is welcomed. This Reserved Matters application follows on and accords with the outline plan permission, which included the matter of layout, amendments to which are carefully scrutinised by officers and relevant consultees and deemed acceptable by this committee in July last year, establishing a clear design framework for this submission. This submission provides details for the final 113 of the approved homes on this site that have Reserved Matters detailing remaining, meaning you are asked to consider today details of landscaping, scale and appearance. The established design principles have been followed to ensure that we will deliver quality homes that are fit for purpose and will meet the needs of future residents. As explained, the amenity and privacy of existing residents will also be maintained in accordance with local policy and the Essex Design Guide. This matter has been thoroughly assessed by your officer in paragraphs 2.9 to 2.68 of the report and found to be acceptable. Your officer's report and presentation has provided a description of the proposal and explained that it is consistent with both the outline plan permission as varied and your adopted development plan. I'd like to emphasise the planning officer's recommendation for approval is not made lightly, but based on a thorough assessment of the proposal. I respectfully request members of the Plan Committee to support the recommendation for approval of the Reserved Matters submission before you. Thank you for your attendance and consideration.
Thank you very much. Would any visiting members wish to speak? Committee members wish to speak? Councillor Mrs. Shaw.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I ask Katie, the lighting that's going to go on this site, will it be LED?
I don't know for sure, so I don't want to say, but presumably it would be to the Essex County Council highway requirements because the street lighting would be within the highway.
Could I come back, Chair? It is within the highway, but if it's not adopted by the highway, then because that's no guarantee it will be adopted by the highway. So I'm asking, will it be LED for the safe? Because everywhere is going LED now, and I just want to make sure this site is going LED as well. Could you find out and let me just know on a separate email?
Yes, absolutely.
much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Councillor, Mr. Shaw. Can I just ask Katie, in respect of Councillor Mrs. Shaw, the rest of the site or the existing site at the moment, is that LED lighting?
Again, I haven't got the information to hand right now, but the intention is for the streets to be, so that these streets here to be adopted by Essex County Council. So I know it's not a foregone conclusion that that will absolutely happen, but there is certainly an intention for that to happen.
Thank you. Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few questions that I want clarified. The trees that are to be planted, are they there for perpetuity? As some trees may not be necessary for the people that will buy those properties. 2, parking. There are only 3 parking spaces for visitors. And where are those parking spaces? And I think there should be more, as considering that the parking areas for the homes are they 2 spaces for the 3 beds and 1 space for the 2 beds? And number 3, I'm a bit concerned that what is happening to the visual part of the neighbouring properties on the bottom of the diagram there. Is there going to, how high is the fence line, or is there some sort of hedge or something to make a better appearance of it? Please. Thank you.
Katie.
Thank you. So into the first question about the trees. So the requirement usually is that landscaping that's agreed is required to be, and trees to be maintained for 5 years. So if a tree dies, so if for instance, they plant a tree and for whatever reason it fails, it's died or, it's damaged in some way, there's a requirement for it to be replanted within 5 years. In terms of the ones in the rear gardens, that would still apply, but after that 5-year period, if that homeowner wanted to, remove it, it's, their call essentially. But I mean, it's these street trees that offer more to the visual amenity to the wider public that are potentially more important for the longer term retention. So the requirement is to give them a good start, so it's that 5-year period. To hope that they'll establish. Okay, that's the trees. The parking spaces. So what we're considering largely this evening is scale, appearance and landscaping. And layout have already been. So access takes into it, that includes where vehicles would be parking. So essentially, these parking bays that are, if I just zoom into this area here, we do have a number of, so this detail is still shown on this plan, but this was already detail shown at the outline stage when members considered the access arrangements. So there are a number of visitor bays here and here and here alongside what will become the Eastern Parkland. So that essentially that arrangement has already been approved, but it's still shown on this plan because it would be sort of a bit.
Katie, can I just stop you there? Are you referring to page 6.32, 2.109?
6.32. Yes.
Where the parking space already approved, so we're not actually determining that tonight.
Yes. So I think page 6.32, the heading car parking, if that's what you're looking at. In the report.
Okay. So it's already covered in the report and was approved. We're actually looking tonight in respect of, if you can just clarify that, please, Katie.
Yeah. So scale. That means the height, the width, or the length and the height of each building on the site. That's for determination. The appearance, so that relates to the appearance of the dwellings that's proposed, but also the materiality, the surfacing treatment of hard surfaced areas. So that can include the streets, and the landscaping. So that can include hard and soft landscaping. But yeah, in terms of parking arrangements, that's been considered at the outline to be acceptable. And there are the number of parking spaces that would be compliant with your policy. Okay.
Thank you. And the third question?
That was in relation to the the southern boundary. So if let's just go to that. So along here, so a new fence, essentially, forming the boundary for the rear gardens of these properties, or some of them are side gardens, would be formed, and that would be sort of a standard 1.8 metre high closed boarded fence.
Can I come back, Chairman?
Councillor Stanley?
Thank you. Yes, I just wondered if there's some sort of greenery could be put along that fencing to make it not look so sort of, it's a wooden fence all the way through sort of thing. It looks, to me, it would look rather sort of bland rather than if they was to put something there, as it's only 1.2, some fencing is over 2 metres. So if it's only 1.2.
1.8.
Sorry,
1.8.
1.8.
And that is sort of the standard closed boarded fence height
beg
that you
your
see
pardon.
round and about in the area. But there would be nothing stopping homeowners, and some of them may well already have, but I don't have photographs of each garden, but they may already have their own sort of planting that sort of softens that boundary anyway. So they might even have their own fencing, but
Yeah,
I think the intention is for a new fence to be put in to
But that
demarcate
it wouldn't be destroyed. In other words, the vegetation that's already there wouldn't be destroyed to put the new fencing in.
the
The
fence.
fencing going in would be on the land of the property owners.
So the new fencing that's going in can only be installed on land that the developer owns.
Developer owns, yeah. The other thing which I didn't bring up, which is the walls around the corners. What height are the walls that you was talking about?
So they are approximately 1.8 again. If you just bear with me, I do have let's have a look. So although there's a lot of plans, so not all are presented to you, but this is the enclosures plan, and in the top corner there you might not be able to see, but the brown line is a 1.8 metre high brick wall to match the brick of the dwelling. So where the walls are going to be provided is shown in brown on this plan. So if I just zoom in, you can see in a different area, but again, in a prominent area, you'd have a 1.8 metre high brick wall around this. So kind of a robust boundary treatment on that bit of the boundary that's very publicly visible. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Stanley. Councillor Mrs Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Question for Katie through you, if that's okay. Katie, I'm referring to page 6.13, paragraph 2.27. I think you may well have covered this off. My question to you is that this paragraph makes comment that it's recommended that a further planning condition be imposed, etc., etc. This is regarding a parking space around plot 427. Can I just ask if this recommendation goes ahead, or if it's not going ahead, how we as a committee, if we approve it, ensures that is the case?
Yeah.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you. So 2.27 does refer, we're recommending an additional condition just to ensure that the parking arrangement here, which is the only part of the site where the parking arrangement differs to the outline consent, which we find equally acceptable, and wouldn't result in any loss or reduction in overall parking at the site, just to ensure that that is maintained in perpetuity in accordance with now this plan, if approved. So that condition is recommended. And if members were to approve the reserved matters tonight, that would be a condition that applies. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Constable.
Thank you, Chairman. I was looking at the attenuation pond and I wasn't aware from previous drawings how close that is to the dwellings around Rochford Garden Way and those roads. It seems awfully close. Has there been anything put in to stop this flooding? And, you know, what would happen if it did flood? Would it flood any of those properties or would it flood down on the green area? I'd just like a bit of clarification on that, please.
Yeah, Chair. So this is not a matter that we can take into account in the determination of this application this evening, because this part of the site is, for starters, it's outside of the red line. So if you see the red lined area to which this application relates tonight is only this area where you can see the kind of like brightly coloured housing, if you like, and the layout of that. So that's what we consider tonight. It was at the outline stage where we considered matters of surface water drainage to the site and where a number of conditions were imposed on the outline consent that required very detailed plans and information to be submitted to the lead local flood authority to agree the drainage scheme that's going to be installed at the site. So I would say if you want further information as to, you know, confidence about, you know, how that's going to operate on the site, I can certainly provide that for you, but I don't have it to hand this evening. Is that okay?
Thank you, Kate.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can ask Katie through yourself, what definition of affordable housing has been used here, and is it possible to see on the plan the affordable housing, the 38 affordable houses, what style they take? And if you have any idea of what the cost of an affordable house would be, that would, just as an indication, that would be interesting.
Afraid I don't on the last one. So I'm sorry, I don't know that, so I can't, I don't want to guess. So I can't give that information about the cost, but I can give you some information about the affordable housing. So the layout plan shows where the affordable housing would be sited. So the red dots here, can you see, is that clear enough for everybody? That's clear. So there's a cluster towards the southern boundary here. There's a cluster on this street here. There's some on the adjoining street here. And then there's a little pair of semi-detached properties there. So that's where they're proposed to be positioned. In terms of, I mean, I could show you all the elevations if you wanted, but just to give you a flavour, if you look just in the bottom right-hand corner to start with, if you can see where street scene A is, yeah. So that's this one at the top. And then so the majority of that street, actually, apart from this property here at the end, and this one here, is market housing. Okay, so we have looked carefully at the materiality, the architectural detailing, to make sure that the market and affordable housing are not readily distinguished, you know, so they're not ones of a higher quality, very obviously, than another. And just to give you an idea, this semi-detached pair here and this semi-detached pair here, one's market and one's affordable. So, and that's not every single house type. I'll just zoom in a little bit, but hopefully it gives you some impression of how we've looked at it in terms of the fenestration, external materials and the like.
Thank you, Katie. Councillor Cross.
Well, can I just ask what the definition of affordable housing is?
Can you bear with me 1 second, please?
Sorry, yeah, you did ask about the definition. So the definition in the NPPF is quite wide. So there is actually, you know, scope for affordable housing to be delivered in a number of ways. But on this particular site, the proposal is for some rented affordable homes. And in the Section 106 agreement relating to the outline consent, there's a requirement for the council to have a nominations sort of first, if you like, dibs on nominating to those affordable homes off the council's list. And then there's a percentage that would be delivered as shared ownership properties where people need a mortgage or, some means of paying off a mortgage of part of the home, and then they pay rent on the remainder.
Councillor Cross.
Yeah, I guess it's a woolly definition, but I guess it's the best we can expect.
Okay.
At this stage. Thank you.
Basically, we're here to determine
I
regarding
know,
the.
I know.
So thank you. Thank you, Kate. Right, thank you, members. Nobody else is indicating to ask a question. In that case, I'll proceed to move the motion from the chair. It is proposed that the reserved matters be approved, subject to conditions set out on pages 6.4 to 6.7 of the report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mrs. Shaw, seconded. I'll now proceed to the vote on a show of hands. Those in favour? That's unanimous. I'll now move to item 7, 23-00733, full land north and west of Bolt Hall Farm. Arwell Evans will present the report.
Non-pecuniary interest on ward councillor for Ashington.
Thank you, Councillor Constable. Arwell.
Thank you, Chairman. Would you just allow us a few seconds for the plan just to be uploaded onto the taskbar? You've got them up? Yeah, okay then. So is that slide 1, is it? Right, thank you, Chairman. This application is for a 49.95 megawatt full-take array with ancillary infrastructure, including grid connection, landscaping and creation of species-rich grassland and pasture management of existing hedgerows, and ecological mitigation in the form of additional land to be provided for nesting skylarks. The proposal is set to be operational over a period of 40 years. So slide 1, I'll just go through what this slide is about. So the grid connection from the site. So the site is here, just to orientate members. So you've got the village of Canewdon here. You've got then the St Nicholas's Church here. The gap roughly between the road going up to St Nicholas's Church and the site, so the width of this field is roughly 393 metres, just to give you an impression of scale. So the site is basically this here. And then the hatched area is Bolt Hall Farm itself, which is the actual farmyard and the infrastructure within the farm. And then the connection point, this red line here, denotes the actual connection point and the line of the actual cabling to make connection with a substation here at South Banbridge, which is located close to an already approved solar farm development, and then there's going to be a pylon off site linking from that point then to the grid itself. So I'm just going to go through a couple of things with this. The application is accompanied by an environmental statement under the Environmental Impact Regulations 2017. On the basis it was highlighted as a part of a screening opinion on request that the development due to cumulative impacts had the potential for significant effects on European designated habitat. And as members note from the report, a number of technical appendices are submitted in this regard, coinciding with a whole range of other technical documents submitted as part of the application. These are listed at section 1, page 7.11 of the report. So just to orientate further then, so what we've got is this line here, it coincides with actually Larkhill Road. You've got Pudsey Hall Lane here. You've got Raypits Farm at the top here by the Crouch. And then you've got parts of Ashington, and then you've got Fanbridge down here, and Rectory Farm on Fanbridge Road there. Perhaps we can move on to... So the site is split into two sites effectively, but it's only two sites because of the fact that you've got the substation to the west of the site. So this is an aerial image, just to give members an idea of scale here. So in terms of the site then, the nearest point of the site, members will note from the report, it stated that the nearest part of the development site to the banks of the Crouch is actually 30 metres. Whilst any apparatus within the site, actually the nearest solar panel to the banks of the Crouch is actually exceeds 90 metres. But just to give an idea of the site area, from this red line here, based on the scale maps that we have, to the banks of the Crouch is roughly 93 metres from here to here. Then across the site at its widest point, which is roughly here, that distance from there to there is roughly 902 metres. North to south, that is 1393 metres, so it's almost a mile. The middle section here, that is 656 metres across, and the nearest part of the development to the church here, as I say, is roughly 400 metres. So it's not in the field next to the church, there's a gap. So if we move on to, so the site area in total is 69.6 hectares. One hectare is 2.46 acres, so roughly it's around 150 acres, roughly, in layman's terms. Just to say then that the north part of the site, there, is in flood zone 3, which it's at the risk of flooding, but it's got sea defences in place. And the south part of the site is out of the floodplain. It's zone 1. There are no ecological or nature conservation designations within the application site itself, but of course the River Crouch has got designations such as special areas of conservation, Ramsar site, special protected areas under EU habitat regulation and designation. There are no listed buildings or nothing of that nature on the site. It's just bare ground, really. And I'm going to come show you a photograph shortly that will help members appreciate the topography of the land. There are some footpaths within the site, which I'll mention at a later point. We'll move on to slide 3, if we can, please. And again, that's just the grid connection and the substation, which is just to the east of Fanbridge Road, and that is Rectory Farm there. If we move on to the aerial plan, which is quite useful, the one with the pink, please. So this plan is quite useful, and really what I wanted to sort of raise here is you can see the network of the field patterns themselves. You can see field boundaries, etc. And when we come to the landscape section of the report, and just the brief section I've got on that is that the development really is working within existing field patterns. So it's not proposing to remove any hedgerow or trees. And I'll be coming back to this. So outside of the application site area, we've got an area hatched here, which that relates to actually skylark mitigation planting on land which is owned by the landowner, but it's not within the application site itself, and that's subject of Section 106, which will come to at the recommendation stage. So Canewdon here, you can see how there's a lovely patchwork of fields, and of course, you know, this field here, if we take that the distance from here to here is roughly 400 meters, that is something just exceeding 400 meters in width. So you know, it's quite a large area. Although, you know, on this plan, perhaps one wouldn't appreciate the scale of them. They're quite large fields. And when we see from the photographs, they're actually quite, although they're open fields in the middle, they are quite well bounded by sort of existing trees and hedgerow networks. So if we move on to the next slide, please. So this is a photograph that I took standing in the field next to the church, and that would have been from Beacon Hill, it's called. So this area here is not part of the application site. So what I'm proposing, members, is to take you through like a walkthrough, if you like, of what we can show you of the site. So this field here is part of the application site, and you'd be looking further west towards Fambridge that way. So if we move on to the next slide, please. So again, we've come around a little bit by now. So this is footpath, I think it's footpath number 1 that's been marked with this sort of weed control area. So we've got Bolthall Farm here, and then we've come around a bit now. So the solar panel development will be in this area here, and then it would be in here as well. So, and there is an area to this side as well, which is one of the parcels shown on the earlier plan. So just to sort of give you an idea of sort of scale and where it is. And I would say from where I was standing there to there, it would probably be a good 900 meters. So it's quite a distance away. If we move on to the next slide, please. That is just for context. This shot is from the same position looking north towards the Crouch. And the only reason I'm showing you this, members, is that the skylark mitigation area would be broadly in this area here, but that is actually not part of the application site. So it's in that area that I showed on the previous photograph. So if we move on to the next slide, please. Yeah, lovely, thank you. That's fine, thank you. So what we've got here is can we zoom up on that? Should be the general site layout plan, shouldn't it? Showing do we have an earlier plan, which is do we have an earlier plan, which is, yeah, that's the one. That's what I wanted to show, thank you. Right, okay, so this is the general arrangement plan. So just to talk you through some of this. So these hatched areas shows then how they're split into parcels, and members will remember me saying that the nearest part of the solar panel array to the Crouch was roughly, I think it's about 93 meters. So there's a patch here, which will be species-rich grassland, which will be an area that will be left, and we'll see that on the landscape plan shortly. And what members will see is, so the existing farm track will be used for access, but these browny orange areas are areas of new track to be created then. And as you'll read from the report, these are just shallow excavations of about 200 meters deep, and they'll have like a geocellular kind of terrain membrane that will be put down. It's just to provide access internally then to these various parcels. And then this is the line of a reconfigured footpath, which I think is footpath number 1, which is subject to a diversion order outside that of there's a couple of acts within the Planning Act. They could do this under the Highways Act. Are we able to zoom in a little bit on that drawing? Possibly, thank you. So if we scroll down a little bit, so basically what we see here is the main sort of like infrastructure in terms of control room, spare parts room and things will be positioned centrally here. So strategically, when the works are going on, all the sort of the containerized elements will be in this area here. And then the dashed line here denotes the deer fencing, which is about 2.1 meters high, deer fencing around the site to provide security. And there will be CCTV cameras, etc. So that's the general site layout. Obviously, this orientation here is south facing, so the panels will be facing south. The top of the stanchion, if you like, the section, if you looked at it like that, would be broadly 3 meters high and at an angle of 15 to 20 degrees slope, if you like. Yeah, that's fine. If we could move on to the next one, the landscaping, if we can, please. So the scheme does incorporate quite a lot of landscaping, and what I would like to point out is perhaps if we can go to the top of the screen, please, and scroll down if we can. So in an area here, there's some scrape there. So there'll be an area of sort of just light scrape where there'll be sort of like natural sort of attenuation basins. So I'm just emphasizing there's another one here as well. I'm just emphasizing, members, that these are not required for any flood storage capacity. They're purely there for biodiversity enhancements. The application was submitted before the statutory requirement for biodiversity net gain came into play. So it's not required to meet the statutory guidance, but this scheme does provide enhanced hedgerow planting. Just bear with me. The dark green is existing hedgerows. So dark green are existing. The light green is additional hedgerow planting, and the dark spots here are additional tree planting within existing hedgerows. So the idea is that will be to actually try and sort of enhance those existing field edges, just to enhance those boundaries really. So nothing has been taken away, no trees have been cut down, no hedging has been taken away. And obviously, the one thing I wish to emphasise as well is under the visual impact, which we'll come to shortly, is obviously that if you were standing by the banks of the River Crouch, you'd be looking at the back end of the solar panels, you'd be looking at the metal framework for the panels. If we move on to the cumulative scheme approved, we'll move on just to the coloured coding map. So I thought it'd be useful for members to see. Yeah, there were two of those landscaping. We'll just move on to, yeah, that's fine. So just explain to members then, is the report obviously covers the cumulative sort of impact in terms of landscape and visual impacts in particular. So just to explain then, the dark blue patches here is the approved South Fambridge Hall scheme, which is 210605. That one was 164.34 acre site, and that hasn't been developed yet. The turquoise is the grassland scheme, which was determined relatively recently. That one was 230047 full. And the pink actually is the existing scheme that's there already. I couldn't really show you in the photograph, but if you zoomed one of my photographs up, so when I was standing on site, I could actually see, you know, the glare or the, you know, the whitish sort of effect that I was looking when I was standing here looking across. I could actually see that across, you know, at probably 1.6 miles away from where I was standing there. So that's quite useful just to see what the relationship of the proposed here is to the already approved grassland scheme, the already developed out scheme here, and then the approved Fambridge scheme, which has not been developed out yet. Okay, so we'll just go on to some visual impacts, because this is discussed at quite some length in the report. So if we go to slide 013, please. Yeah, okay then. So as members will note, that visual impacts is covered at some length within the report. So the idea behind this is that visual impacts, specific visual receptor point, exposure the site to certain views of varying degrees, basically, from footpaths mainly, because the area has got the Roach Valley Way, and this actually picture here is taken from Beacon Hill, so the field next to the church, looking at the site here. So, and then obviously the matter was covered in the submitted LVIA, which is the Landscape Visual Impact Assessment. And that was quite a realistic exercise that the developer undertook to basically identify where the main receptors were. So if you were standing within the countryside, within certain areas, mainly on footpaths or on the banks of the River Crouch, where actually could you see the site from? And the LVIA also looks at the cumulative visual effects. That if you were standing, for example, on the banks of the Crouch, could you see all of those solar farm developments once built out in that same visual envelope, we call it. That's fine. So we'll just go, I'll talk through now these slides. So this is basically this is the southeastern extremity of the site then, and Bolthall Farm is here. We move on to the next slide. So what this is quite useful, members, for you to see that the LVIA also included photomontages that depicted what the panels would look like in year 1 to year 5. So you've just seen the blank field, and then this depicts the arrangement of the panels within this field once they've been established. Thank you. We'll move on to the next slide. Thank you. So again, the site basically then comes around this way and comes around towards, because obviously we said that the site is within 90 meters, the solar panels themselves within 90 meters of the crouch. So it's basically curves around from the previous slide that we saw and comes around like this in this area here. And there's an area here as well that juts out slightly. Thank you. And then there we go. The next shot shows you what the visual impression. So this shot would be from footpath number 1, and you'd be standing broadly west of Beacon Hill, just coming down the field as I was standing in that field. And that's a photo depiction from the actual LVIA itself. So where you've seen number 1, the photographs that were shown earlier, you can see what that visual impression would be like when you're standing within that field. Thank you. We'll just move on to the next one. Thank you. Then that shot is actually within the site itself. So we've come now behind to the west of Bolthall Farm. So this is St Nicholas's Church here. So the previous shot was taken standing here. So this is well within the central part of the site now. Larkhill Road would be this way. Canewdon, obviously behind the church. So we're in the central part of the site. The River Orch is up here. So the development is sort of curves around and comes around in this direction. So that's a shot looking up again from that footpath. And it's in that field, I believe, that the footpath would be slightly rediverted to run in between the solar panels. Thank you. We'll move on to the next slide, please. And that is an impression, a visual impression of looking up through part of the site again towards St Nicholas's Church. We'll move on to the next. Thank you. Again, so that is actually towards the bottom of that field I showed in the slide, 2 slides previous. So we're looking, I think that is Bolthall there, and then St Nicholas's Church. So what can be ascertained as well is, I haven't said this, but in terms of site levels above ordnance and datum, is that the land generally falls from the south to the north, and then it rises up towards the bank of the River Crouch, and the River Crouch is further up to the left. Okay, we're almost done with the slides. We can just move on to the next, please. And this is quite a useful shot. I think this is the last, isn't it, of the shots? So this is quite useful. So this was an extract from the LVIA technical document. So this is on the other side of the Crouch estuary, on the Maldon side, looking. So this is the church, and then there's the gap of the 400 meters. So that is a realistic depiction of actually the site is actually in here. So you've got the banks of the Crouch on this side. So from a distance probably of about 1.5 to 2 miles, the land does rise. So my reckoning is that you will have field boundaries, so that it won't be like an unbridled view of the back stanchions of the solar panels, because there'll be intervening views in terms of these hedge boundaries as well. I think that's the last of the slide, isn't it, I think? So I'm just going to move, members. I'm aware the time is going. I'm just going to highlight some key issues. We've gone through the visual impacts. And I think basically to conclude on the visual impacts, what the LVIA concluded, and I would concur with this, is that there is no doubt that there will be some visual impacts, because the banks of the River Crouch is used by a lot of people. There's also recreational sailing along the Crouch. So there will be some impacts, moderate to adverse up close. So if you're walking along the footpath number 1 at Beacon Hill or through the site, you know, you'll be looking at solar panels in that area here. So there will be moderate to adverse impacts. But I think overall, that those impacts are quite localized. They won't be sort of spread over a massive area. So going on to landscape impacts, slightly different. So the conclusions within the report, members, on landscape impacts were, do you remember when I showed you the field margins and how the cluster of fields had been made up? So the one thing to remember about this scheme is it's not like, say, creating a reservoir or HS2, ripping up the countryside. It's quite a large scheme, but it's actually settled within the existing field patterns. So I'd agree with the conclusions of the landscape assessment is that that is also almost nullified because you're not creating a new pattern to the countryside. The existing hedgerows remain. So just coming on to some final comments, really, and just the actual conclusions of the main heading. So the principle of development, this is covered, members, at paragraph 2.16 to 2.27 of the officer's report. So what, in effect, the report concluded was that the development in terms of the main consideration within the framework is inappropriate development and harmful in greenbelt terms, particularly in terms of visual harm and cumulative harm in this respect. But of course, the report throughout various sections sort of refers back to the very special circumstances, and these are discussed in quite a lot of detail at 2.28 to 2.57 of the report. And it concludes that the benefits of the proposals materially outweigh the harm, and it refers to the policy statement EN1 and the renewable energy infrastructure statement EN3. So the landscape and visual, as I've just discussed it, these are covered at quite some length at paragraphs 2.58 to 2.171. So the overall conclusion, as I said, members, was there was a localised residual effect, minor to adverse, on the farmland within the main site, but easily reversible following decommissioning. And that was a point that was made within the application submission. So obviously they're going to be there for 40 years. So, you know, it's half of someone's lifetime, isn't it? So, but I suppose it's not seen as a permanent development. And that was the developer's argument. And then the introduction of new landscape elements, including additional planting, would have been beneficial, with beneficial effects. And there are conditions attached to the actual recommendation, members, at condition 7 and condition 8. So the heritage impacts, they're covered at 2.175 to 2.195. And the conclusion was that there was lesser substantial harm to the setting of St. Nicholas's Church, but this harm is balanced against the other considerations within the planning balance. Now, I'm almost finished. The ecology and biodiversity, they're covered at a lot of length within the report, paragraph 2.209 to paragraph 332. So I'm just going to say that the assessment concludes as subject to the mitigation set out by condition relating to a number of measures, including making further land available for priority species, including skylark, the development will have no significant effects. Place Services, Ecology and Natural England have no objection to the development, subject to the imposition of conditions as have been included in the recommendation. The skylark mitigation that was shown on, I think it was Plan 4, the pink bit, there's 2.7 hectares of additional land to be put aside for skylark mitigation. Flooding, it passes the sequential and exception tests that have been applied, and this application meets those tests. The air flood map shows the northern extent of the site to be within the defended flood zone. In effect, what it means, members, is that the area is considered to be at risk of a 0.5%, 1 in 200 or greater annual probability of tidal flooding, but benefits from flood defences. The remaining part of the site falls in flood zone 1, meaning in effect it has a less than 0.1 annual probability of flooding. The panels themselves are mounted 0.8 metres above surrounding ground levels and flood-free during all considered events. And there's no increase in runoff rates from the site. Conditions to do with surface water drainage are included at condition 19, 20 and 21. The agricultural land classification is 3A and 3B, meaning of modest quality, which is 3B, or 3A, very good quality. It isn't grade 1 or grade 2, which is excellent, grade 1, or grade 2 very good quality. Therefore, in terms of the best use of versatile land, there's no objection from Natural England subject to condition 22. Almost finished. Highway impacts, this is covered at 2.368 to 3.76. So there's no objection from Essex Highways, and subject to the diversion of the rights of way, subject to section 247 or 257 of the Town and Country Planning Act or the Highways Act, there is no objection. So in concluding, members, the planning balance and the case for renewable energy has been considered in some length within the report. And it is the recommendation that, subject to the necessary consultation direction to consult with the Secretary of State under the direction of 2021, and as cited at section 5 of this report, and subject to the recommendations cited in the requirements for section 106 to secure off-site skylark nesting mitigation provision, and the subject of 24 conditions as recommended, it is recommended, Chairman, that the application be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Arwell. I think that the last, excuse me, the last comment you were referring to 7.96, item 5. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was very interesting reading, a very extensive and full report. I do thank you for that. We have one public speaker for this application. Mr. Roseblade, would you like to come up to speak in support of the application? Are you fully aware of the comms?
I am. Thank you.
Excellent. You have 5 minutes.
Good evening, and thank you, Chair. And thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Council's planning officers and the supporting technical officers for engaging constructively with the applicant on this application, both prior to and following submission of the application. The proposed solar farm recommended for approval by the Council's officers here today will provide significant benefits both nationally and locally, namely the provision of reliable, clean, renewable electricity to the national grid to reduce carbon emissions, tackle the climate emergency, increase British energy security, and deliver wider environmental benefits with regard to the significant biodiversity net gain and carbon sequestration. The new government's position on net zero and the critical need for renewable energy is very clear. The new government is moving quickly to deliver as many renewable energy projects as possible to kickstart green economic growth, which is a central tenet of their strategy to deliver prosperity and wealth for all, and to deliver on the objective of achieving a decarbonised electricity network by 2030, an ambitious but achievable target that is necessary for the country. The challenge in achieving this target is capacity within the grid network to accept renewable energy generation connections. The government's national policy statement on solar energy is clear that the capacity of the grid network to accept a connection is critical to the feasibility of a development proposal. Until such time that the infrastructure of the national grid is overhauled by the Great Grid Upgrade, grid capacity is scarce, and it must be utilised wherever available if we are to meet government targets in relation to net zero. The proposed development being put forward here today is in an area with available grid capacity to connect renewable energy. This capacity in the network is the reason that multiple solar farms have come forward in the local area, and national policy is clear that all of these solar farms are urgently needed. The applicant has worked with the landowner at Bolthall Farm to develop a scheme that fits with the local landscape, minimises the impact on local communities, and ensures that the area remains an attractive place to live both now and for future generations. As demonstrated by the plans accompanying the application, including the visualisations of the landscape and visual impact assessment, the applicant has located the proposed development in a part of the landscape that is less open in character appearance and less prominent in views across the estuary towards Canewdon and Canewdon Church. The proposed development is within the Greenbelt and by definition is therefore harmful to the Greenbelt. However, when balancing this minimal harm to the openness of the Greenbelt, and considering the reversibility of the development such that it is not permanent, it is clear that the very substantial benefits of the solar farm outweigh the harm, and that in this instance, the very special circumstances required to justify Greenbelt development do exist. The Council's professional and impartial planning officer agrees with the applicant's conclusions. There are no objections to the scheme from Natural England, the Environment Agency or Historic England, and the Council's technical officers, Local Highway Authority and Lead Local Flood Authority equally do not object to the application, subject to the planning conditions set out in the officer's report. The matter of cumulative impacts resulting from the scheme, in addition to those already built or consented within the area, has been addressed in full within the environmental statement. These effects have therefore also been considered by the aforementioned statutory environmental bodies and by the council officers. Whilst the scheme would result in a level of additional harm by virtue of its proximity to the other solar farms in the area, this level of harm is considered acceptable on balance and is clearly outweighed by the benefits of the scheme in this location. The applicant and the council's planning officer are each in agreement that very special circumstances exist and that, subject to the planning conditions and the Section 106 agreement, planning permission should be granted for this development here this evening. Thank you all.
Thank you. Any visiting members wish to speak? Committee members, Councillor Constable.
Thank you. As a ward councillor for the area, I'm quite concerned. One, the officer glossed over where all the transformers and other buildings are going to go on the site and what screening is going to be put in place to cover it. But the biggest problem I see is the connection to the grid, where it's going to come down Larkhill Road, down Canewdon Road, and then back into Fanbridge Road. They are major routes for Canewdon, for the schools, for the secondary schools and other schools. And when it comes down to Fanbridge Road, that is the only road in and out of the area. And I was wondering why it's not been thought about to take it across the fields where it's not going to do any harm to people's lives and disruption, because the amount of time that's going to take is probably 5 to 6 months to dig the road up, which is an awful lot of time. And I was wondering why it's not been considered taking it across the fields. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Constable. Oh, well.
My understanding is that red line is on the inner side of the, within the landowners, is on the inner side of the road. But that's the only way they can make connection to that main point here. But it's a fair question.
Sorry, Chairman, can someone identify the red line for me?
The connection point here. So it's my understanding is following an existing boundary with the road. But I can't provide any more clarity regarding that, because that could well be under a different consenting regime in terms of any rights to actually make that link. I don't know whether legal have got a view on that.
Thank you, Arwell.
Sorry,
Stephen.
I was just going to add to that. I'm not wholly clear where that red line goes, but maybe the applicant can assist. But certainly, if it was in the highway, you would need authority from the highway authority to dig up the road and place it in within the highway. Considerable time and expense. So that's just an assumption that would be in land owned by the applicant as opposed to taking it through the highway. But I suppose only the applicant can confirm that.
Do you have any further on that, Arwell? Mr. Roseblade? Would it be possible for you to answer that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the red line does, it follows the public highway along Larkhill Road. You're correct that to lay the trench, you'd need Section 278 approval from under the Highways Act to do that. The trench for the cable is about between 300 and 400 millimetres wide, I believe. And and could be laid. It wouldn't take 5 to 6 months to do. I don't have the exact length of time to do, but my understanding is you can do sort of between 50 and 100 meters of this per day if needed. It's basically putting a conduit below the hard top and then relaying the hard top over the top. So there would be traffic management procedures in place. Yeah.
Just for clarification, is it going down the road or is it going down on private land?
It would be either within the verge within the public highway or within the road.
All right, and the parts where it comes along, where you've got Moon's Farm, all those houses there and High Steppers, and then where it comes back onto the Ashington Road and goes down the Fanbridge Road, you're looking at the same thing with partial road closures, are you?
It wouldn't be road closures. It would be just traffic management. It's quite a narrow operation to lay the cable. So you would just have sort of temporary traffic lights for the sections as you're working your way along that road.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman, would you wish me to come back to the question regarding the control buildings and the landscaping? The question was raised about the landscaping around some of the on-site cabins, etc. If we go to...
Yes, thank you, Al.
Yeah, if we go to slide... this one here. Yeah. So if we zoom in on that. So apologies if I glossed over that, trying to get through my presentation. So, so basically, the items that are listed on page 7.13 of the report, so members will see there, the corresponding plans which set out the development are as follows. Just bear with me. And then there's basically on that page 7.13, it actually lists all those items. So basically within this area here, so what they are is actually covered in various parts of the reports, but they're listed under those, substation compound, there's the spares container. So they're all, if we can zoom in, there's various keys, but all the ancillary infrastructure, if we can sort of find those, Katie, there we go. So they're zoomed in. So they'll be located here. And then basically they're quite close to, this is the track that comes down. So they're quite close to the intersection of the various sort of bumped up hedging, if you like. There's existing hedges. So there'll be screens. So if you were at the crouch here, they'd be screened within this middle parcel, by hedging to the north and then hedging to the east. So there will be, there will be landscaping that seeks to sort of minimize the impact of those as much as possible.
Councillor Constable, does that satisfy you? Thank you. Councillor Stanley. Stand corrected, you're not on my list, but I will, yes, allow.
Thank you. I've got three concerns or three questions, if that's okay, through you, Chair, to Arwell. I'm very concerned about the flood zone 3, because if you come from the church going all the way down, it floods anyway. We've got a continual flood going down there, which causes absolute chaos. Bridle paths, you're saying about footpath 1. Are we losing any bridle paths? Because it's an equestrian area all the way down Larkhill. As you go from Anchor Lane down to Larkhill, there's horses, people keep horses, stables, blah, 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 and there's bridle paths. Are we losing any? Can you advise on that? And significant trees, you said there's going to be planting. Are they going to be well-established trees or these little saplings? Because we need a decent site to put a condition in. We need to put that it's a substantial tree that's going to be planted, not one that's going to, like these whips, that will be lost within 6 months because no one's maintaining them. So that's my three concerns. Thank you, Arwell.
Thank you, councillor Shaw. Orwell.
Thank you. So dealing with the first issue, you remember that I said in the presentation about it was only a part of the site that was in flood zone 3A, which was basically right at the top end of the site. So yeah, there is a flooding map actually, Katie. Can we bring up? There's a spare plan. There's a flooding plan, isn't there? Flood plan. There we go. So there we go. So that is, it depicts annual exceedance rates. So it's correct to say that technically that the part of the site here is in flood zone 3A, so it's vulnerable to flooding, but it's just right at the top here. But because, members remember, because it's protected by an existing flood embankment, do you remember me saying about the, let me have a look. Yeah, there we go. So the flood map shows the northern extent of site is located within the defended flood zone 3. And I said, didn't I, that basically what it actually means is that that area there, here, if there's a tidal surge, if you like, and the Crouch bursts its banks, the flood modelling based on like annual exceedance probability, what it actually means is that that area there, in layman's terms, is at a 0.5%. It's a 1 in 200 or greater annual probability risk of flooding. And the remaining part of the site falls in flood zone 1. So I can't really answer it other than that is there is a risk, but it's a very small part of the site. And the only thing I would say that members will note that I said that the site passes what I call the sequential test and the exceptions test. So the exception test is applied, the sequential test is applied. Could there be anywhere else in the district where that type of development could be located on a comparable site at lesser risk of flooding? And the exercise that has been undertaken as part of the submission shows that it actually meets the sequential test, because the guidance on solar farms means is that they do cover large areas. So it actually passes those. So that addresses the flooding. I can confirm regarding footpaths, there is absolutely no proposal to take away any footpaths.
Let's come back. No, we're not taking any away footpaths. I was talking about bridle paths.
Bridle paths.
Which is completely different.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
thank you.
So in terms of, I'll rephrase that, in terms of any statutory rights of way, there is no, extinguishment orders or nothing of that sort, but there is that footpath 1, which is going to be diverted. But in terms of any bridle ways, I know that the Roach Valley Way is a sort of a regional trail of more significance, where you've got greater receptors, more people using it. But there is, to answer that question, there is no taking away of anything, only altering the line of one statutory rights of way, which happens to be a footpath through that central section of the site. And then in terms of significant trees, that is a very good point that is raised. And members will note that in my little bit on landscaping, I said that landscaping has been covered. So although we've got that landscaping plan I showed you, members, is that a condition, what I recognised is a 7 and 8.
Sorry, Orwell, can you refer to 7.55, 2.205?
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is at condition 7, it's at page 7.3. So although we have a landscaping scheme, which I've showed you this evening, I don't feel that's good enough, because we don't know how wide the hedges are. We don't know what type of trees are going to go in. So what we've done is we've included a condition, and it starts with notwithstanding the details. And that actually set up very clearly that we want a plan showing the soft landscaping to be submitted to the authority for its written approval. So the plan will show precise widths of all new hedges and woodland planned to be planted. The details shall include hard surface, including pathways, driveways, existing trees and hedges, planting plans, specification of species size, planting centres, number of percentage mix. The whole caboose is covered in condition 7. And then we also, to add on to that, we want then a submission of a landscaping management plan to make sure that when they submit those plans that we will have a look at a later date, that when, if we are in a position to approve condition 7, we're adding on condition 8 that this, there's also a landscape management plan, because what we want to make sure is, I think there was a point that was made by Councillor Stanley earlier on the other case, is that in perpetuity, we want to make sure that the screening and those actual measures are carried out as they've said that they would. Thank you.
Thank you, I will.
Councillor, Mr. Shaw.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Constable has actually covered my point. I mean, if anybody knows Lark Hill Road, if that's going to be dug up, the speed limit along there is national speed limit, and that road bends and twists. They're going to block a lot off to make that safe, and I've got a problem about that.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chairman. A few things come to mind. First of all, I'm going to ask you to look at 7.9, rights of way 23, which indicates that new routes would have to be constructed and to the satisfaction of the local planning authority. And I would assume that from what Councillor Mrs. Shaw has said on the rights of horses and public footpaths as well. One other thing that comes to mind as well is what you showed a picture of the solar panels when it was quite cloudy, and I don't see how the solar panels can work on a cloudy day like you've shown, but what would be the glare from the solar panels if it was very, very sunny, like we've had recently at 28 degrees and 30 degrees? What would be the glare from those solar panels on the surrounding occupants, residents that is, not animals? Plus the fact, what mitigation has been put forward in respect of food production from the ground that is now going to be developed as a solar farm?
Councillor Stanley, can we answer those three first? And then you can come back?
Certainly, yes, Chairman.
Oh, well.
Rights of way, sorry, which page was that?
7.9.
7.9. So that was specifically in relation to diversion, though, isn't it? In terms of, so that yeah, rights of way, but it's in specifically, so the wording on the second page is securing the diversion of the existing definitive rights of way. So we're not talking about taking anything away. And this condition here is the condition that was suggested by Essex Highways. So there's a process that goes on here, is outside the planning process, is the diversion order, but that's backed up with a planning condition that sort of basically it's requiring the diversion of where that path is required to be diverted in order that in effect the status quo will prevail, isn't it? So it's not actually, the key word there is in the condition is the diversion. So it's not actually taking nothing away. It's just altering the line of an existing rights of way to make the link to the existing network, isn't it? It's the best I can answer that. So it's not talking about.
Okay, thank you, Al. Can I just, before the second item was rather than your glint and glare?
Yeah.
If you refer to 7.55.
Yeah, that's right. So can I, yeah, so is it 7.55, is it? Spare with me, Chairman. Yeah, so the glint and glare, I know there's only a couple of paragraphs on this, but basically the assessment, it did do a glint and glare assessment, and basically, I couldn't, because of the length of technical documents submitted, if I showed you everything, we'd be here a very long time. But anyway, the glint and glare assessment is covered in a nutshell at 2.202 and 203. So an assessment had been undertaken, and it looked at things like residential receptors and reflection. And And the assessment considers potential effects on dwellings and roads within approximately 1 kilometre to the east, south and west of the proposed development. The glint and glare assessment reports that due to the existing screening and the proposed screening in the landscape, there'd be no significant glint and glare impacts. So, and I've got no technical evidence from, we've got no technical evidence to counter that argument. So we, in the best, taking the application as submitted, we have no reason not to accept that as a cogent argument and conclusion. And then the other one was mitigation and food production, wasn't it? Yeah, okay. So that's covered, isn't it, in the report? Let me just bear with me. I'm just looking at my summary.
It is in the report. I
Yeah,
was
so
just
it's
trying
at
to find.
2.362 to 2.367. So the site is, actually, you've got a plan, haven't we, on the land classification, if you bring it up, Katie, if you wouldn't mind. There's a plan on the agricultural land classification. Yeah, so I knew this question would come up, so here's the plan. So what we've got here, if you bear with me, I think I can't, can you zoom up on that, please, Katie? I think the light green is 3, just bear with me, can you scroll to the top? Yeah, so the dark green is 3A, and 3A is good quality land, which is 3A. And then, so 3A is the green bit, isn't it? And then the dark green bit is 3A. So there's good quality land, which is, so in terms of land classification, it's not grade 1, the best, grade 2. So grade 1 is excellent, grade 2 is, very good. This is mid-range sort of classification. So just to reiterate, sorry, members, dark green is a 3A, and then the rest of the site is 3B, which is the light green, which is being of modest quality. So in terms of your question, I think it was about mitigation. We've, again, consulted with Natural England, and obviously this assessment has broken down not just into grade 3, it's actually broken it down to that further classification of 3 and 3B. So my view is that, the land within that belt along the coastal protection belt is grade 3, whether it's grade 3A or 3B. We've approved other developments within the same agricultural classification. So my view would be is that isn't taking out grade 1 or grade 2 land. So grade 1 is blue, grade 2 would be the light blue. So I appreciate that, we need to be self-sufficient as a nation, but there's no evidence to suggest that taking that land out, even if it was grazed by sheep under the panels, that would actually be of any detriment to food production in the region or in the UK.
Thank you all. Councillor Stanley, if you refer to 7.83, 2.363.
Yes, so I have read what the.
Sorry, I was just going to
Yes,
clarify. It says
I've read what the land is, whether it's 3A, 3B, C, D, X, Y, Z, and all the rest of it. What I am asking is what mitigation has been put together to mitigate the land at the moment of what it is producing in the way of food, not whether the soil is this good or that good or anything else, in relation to where it's going to be produced in the future.
Thank you.
Can I answer that?
Oh, well.
Yeah, the answer is because it's not grade 1 or grade 2, no mitigation is required.
So we're actually losing parcels of land which we could use for growing crop, and now there's no mitigation on that whatsoever. I find that very, very, it's a farm. The farmer's been using it for decades, and here he is saying that the land is now not useful, not any good for growing crops, and yet he's been using it for decades. I find that very difficult to understand, and to put the solar panels in when we are this country is trying to produce food for the table for everybody. And here we are putting no use to it whatsoever apart from generating electricity, which will not generate for 5 years, minimum of 5 years. And, you know, it's going to take maybe a year or two to get this working. I'm
Thank you,
really
thank you,
lost.
Councillor Stanley. That has been noted and taken into consideration. Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Chairman. Going back to footpaths, sorry. I'm not sure what footpaths are going to be relocated. Can you show them on your diagram, please?
It was footpath 1, I believe.
Where does that?
Oh, well.
Because I've got it on OS map, so I know where it is. I know where you're talking about, but I don't know what footpath it is. If it's above Larkhill Avenue, can you show me on the solar farm where you're going to relocate that footpath to? Because that's the original footpath there on the backslide. Because at the moment it comes down at the bottom of Beacon Hill and it goes diagonally up to St Nicholas Church.
What I can gather, because I did try and glean this as well as part of the, right, so that there is that path, isn't it? Yeah. So we've got the Boltall farm here, and it looks to me as if it's here. It's going across there, isn't it?
So it's going to go right in between the development?
Yeah, it's going to go in a straighter line, so they're going to get more solar panels in if they're set 2.35 meters apart, you know, in rows. They need to get basically a better line in. That's my taking on that.
When my next question, sorry, is if you happen to walk that path, which I regularly do, what effect of the glare on a bright sunny August day is going to have on people that do walk that footpath, please?
The honest answer is that I don't know that, because I'd need to be there on the day that happens. So the glint and glare assessment hasn't gone into that much detail. So I wouldn't know, Chairman.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eaves.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from many previous questions around the footpaths, paragraph 2.8 actually mentions other footpaths, 4 and 24, 24 being one of the long distance footpaths. There's been no mention as to where they actually cross the site and if they're affected at all. I understand from responses that we've had so far that there won't be any blockages, but I don't know where they actually cross the site. If you could have clarification on that, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. The honest answer to that is it's not entirely clear to me in terms of I can answer that question, because I know about footpath 1, it's clear where that is, but there's nothing that I can see within the submission that actually, because it's diversions and not extinguishment, the view that officers take is that there's a status quo that's prevailed, but it's subject to a different section of the Planning Act or the Highways Act. So there's a different tier of control on that, but as far as I can see, there isn't a submission within the planning document saying this is an overlay of the existing plans and this is an overlay of how it's going to look. I don't have that information to be able to answer members. I don't know whether there's a legal view on that.
Sorry, can I?
Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. As an ex-highways lawyer, I can probably answer most of the questions. With regards to the development you're considering tonight, the fact is they can't implement that development unless they effectively have diverted those public rights away. So you can't just develop over public rights of way. That's an offence. So what the developer's going to have to do is speak to Essex County Council about diverting those public rights of way accordingly to fit in with the development. So if that puts your mind at rest, it has to go through a separate statutory procedure with Essex County Council as a highway authority to deal with that. And that's separate from what you're dealing with tonight. And if the developer can't, in effect, get that diversion, they'll probably have to come back and revisit what they're proposing in terms of the development here to fit in with the public right of way that exists. So I don't know if that helps you in any way, but I work for a county council.
Yeah.
I've done stopping up, I've done diversion orders, I've done it all ways. But
No.
it doesn't authorise them to obstruct.
I understand that, but
Sorry, I'm just going, Councillor Reeves.
Yeah, just one follow-on question on that. With the diversion of a footpath, my understanding is that there has to be a public consultation. Has that happened? We have had no mention of that at all.
Oh, well.
Yeah, my understanding of that wouldn't have happened until they secure their permission, and then there's like a fast track process then, because I think as I understand it, there's a chicken and egg situation that until you've got a development that's been approved, it's only then that you're really going to take the other measures under the separate acts to enable that to happen, to enable that development to take place. Am I correct on that?
Stephen, could you come in on that, please?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. It's very difficult to stop up or divert public rights of way without any form of consultation, but that will be dealt with by Essex County Council, and there will be consultation in the usual way. But in effect, a developer will want to get their planning permission first, and then look to get that diversion as part and parcel of that planning permission. And if you're looking at a diversion as opposed to a stopping up, it's more likely, but again, that will be subject to Essex County Council considering the application, looking at what's been proposed, mindful of what's existing.
Councillor Reeves.
Just one come back, please. So do we need to condition that? So is that belt and braced?
Stephen.
I mean, we don't need to condition it because it's controlled by separate legislation. So the fact is, irrespective of anything we do, it doesn't authorise or allows anywhere for them to build over the public right of way. So there's nothing we can, that's down to Essex County Council as highway authority. Harwell may have a condition that says, you know, I suppose prior to commencement, the 278 arrangements. I don't know. I'll let Harwell say, because he's looking at the condition right now, but that's generally the case.
So basically, because we know what was already been discussed, it has been doubled up with condition 23, which was a condition that Essex Highways suggested that doubles up on the separate legislation. So it's almost like it's a condition, but it's almost a bit like an informative, almost saying that be clear that it's condition 23 on page 7.9. No development shall be permitted to commence on site until such time. The rest of the wording is, you know, so it basically cross-references to the fact that you need to progress with that diversion order to be able to implement the development, which falls in line with what we've discussed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to go back to Councillor Knight. As long as it's in reference to the pathways.
yeah, yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I understood all that, but if it gets granted and then it goes to highways and then they have to put the diversion in place before the development comes in, the diversion is where it is the diversion straight through the site, because you can't have people walking through the site when you've got people, builders and that working on it. So where's it going to go when you've shut one to get the diversion in place, but you can't walk through because they're building?
Stephen Harwell. Stephen.
It depends on where the proposed diversion is going to be. There are many times when the diversion could be around the entirety of the site. There'll probably be a temporary closure of the route while the development is going on, pending a temporary diversion until a more permanent situation is found. And certainly, when you're developing a site, you'd want to have a temporary diversion because you don't want people walking down there while you're building. I mean, it's dangerous. And then there'll be a temporary route that people will be using pending a permanent diversion of the public right of way to a naturally safer course. As a developer, you don't generally want people walking straight through the middle of your development in such a way. So you would try and get the safest route. And certainly as a county council, you have an obligation to maintain public rights of way. You don't want people effectively just walking into dangerous situations. It is a public right of way. It's got to be safe. And Essex County Council will make sure of that because that's their obligation.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to state that I'm 100% on board regarding achieving net zero by 2050, 2030, even before if possible. But I can't support this application for the following reason. That is that the vast amount of area of arable land that is being taken for this solar farm doesn't justify it. We're torn between two things. I recognise the need to be self-sufficient or not reliant on imported energy. The Ukraine war has obviously forced up energy prices, and this government now is supporting our own industry with GB Energy being created with the objective of reducing our energy costs. So I recognise that. The previous government had a ban, I believe, on onshore wind farms. Therefore, the need to have large areas of land taken for solar farms became greater. That situation has changed, and I believe the new government have given the green light for onshore wind farms. Now, this proposed site is vast in area. It's taking a lot of food production. We also need to be self-sufficient on food because since Brexit has increased our cost of imported foods, we're becoming more reliant on imported foods because the land is being taken for house building and creation of solar farms. Now, this farm will give us 50 megawatts on a nice hot sunny day. That could be also created, well, not created, you can't create energy, but you can convert energy from wind using the largest wind turbines, which are about 6 megawatt. So 10 wind turbines could produce enough energy or the equivalent amount of energy, and we would still have that land available for food production. So I know that's been covered in quite a lot of detail. It looked like barley crops or wheat crops, which are very important to the food chain. So I won't be supporting it. I would support an application for 10 wind turbines along the banks of the Crouch, where we know there's plenty of wind, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to sail a yacht. But I can't support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Cross. Councillor Hoy.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the previous chairman of the committee and I both know what happens if you object to one on those grounds, unfortunately. Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Evans, for the report. It was quite comprehensive. And also it was very comprehensive and included lots of the information from the LVIA, which is the Land and Visual Impact Assessment. And you included a lot of the bad as well as the good in this report because of that. However, it does say in paragraph 2.79, page 7.31, that the case officer does not agree with some of the conclusions drawn within the LVIA, that the solar panel structures would not be clearly visible over a wider area. I'll just quote that bit, it obviously says more than that. The report, however, does draw lots of from the LVIA itself. It does say in the actual, and I'm quoting from the actual land value and land and visual impact assessment, sorry, I'm getting the wrong names worked out itself, which is reproducing part in the report. So it does say the proposed development would increase the perception of built development. The solar panels arrays would be perceived as being utilitarian in appearance. It does say it would make it more like an industrial landscape, and some of this is reported. It does talk about mitigation as well with tree planting, as suggested, hedgerows. However, that's a double-edged sword, which I'll come to shortly. There is also the cumulative impact, which the LVIA also mentions, because this is not the only solar farm in the area. In actual fact, for reference, our policy was to have 100 megawatt production by 2030. We've already reached more than that, and this will go much more once it's been approved. With approved sites, I think we must be approaching 200 now. So we're well within that, and there are a number in this area. So this says in the LVIA, which is on page 31 of the LVIA, Scheme A, Scheme B, and the existing solar farm would be perceived as a single large-scale massing in the landscape covering approximately 180 hectares. It says overall landscape impact would increase from medium to small to large to medium impact. Correspondingly, this would increase the landscape effect to major to moderate adverse, which is significant. The magnitude of landscape effect would remain from the short term to the long term due to the scale of developments when taken as a whole. I'm just taking excerpts from this so people have an understanding of the issues it's talking about. There are a number of impact visual points, which are numbered 1 to 12. There's an additional one of 13, which has been put on as well. I'll just say Place Services thought there should have been more as well, and I'll quote from Place Services in a moment. So it says, for instance, that the influence of schemes A and B would therefore increase the visual impact at viewpoint 7 from small to large to medium for the combined cumulative development scenario. The visual effect would therefore increase to major to moderate adverse in the short term, which is significant. From my experience, the visual impact is much more important than losing farmland, which I've learned from attending one inspection at the moment, appeal. If you look at the actual table at the back, it quotes the visual perceptor points. So, for instance, I'll read out the worst ones. There are some which are better, obviously. VP3, major to moderate, significant in the short term, moderate in the long term. VP5, major to moderate, significant in the short term, long term, moderate. The cumulative effects, we have viewpoint 2, VP2, major to moderate in the short term, moderate to significant in the long term. 3, major to moderate, and then moderate in the long term. So these are not insignificant, and there's a few more, I won't quote them all, but there's another 3 or 4 of the same out of the 12 points chosen. This to me is significant, and it does concern me because this is showing that there are significant issues, and I'm guessing it, or not guessing, I'm using guessing as a phrase, but guessing that we are putting a weight to that, and the officer's chosen to put a smaller weight, but I would put a larger weight, and then perhaps the legal advice will come soon. I'm just going to quote from Place Services now, because I know the church was mentioned and that there was no problem with the church effectively. It does say in the report there was, and I quote, and this is from Place Services, and this is quoted in the report as well from the officer. And I'll start partway through. So it's talking about hedgerow screening solar panels to the north and south. Whilst this contributes to reducing the visual impact of the proposals from this visual receptor, the planting creates a total loss of the long distance views of St Nicholas Church in Canewdon, where there are currently strong views of the west. The establishment of this planting would also conflict with the key characteristics of the local landscape character, namely the long distant views and gently undulating arable landscape. So what we're saying is if you're planting to hide the solar panels, that's also affecting the natural landscape, which isn't necessarily of planted trees. We know what we like. We're in a coastal area and we have long views of the coastal area. So the place services aren't particularly happy with it either. So my question really is, oh, and the other point about the church I forgot to mention, it is in here, is that the receptor viewpoint could also be from the top of the tower. So the church estate is clearly built for the views you can get from the tower, and that they haven't really been considered properly either, because they would be affected. So I'm not saying I'm going to move for refusal on this basis, but I want some advice from
Thank you,
Mr. Evans about how much weight he's put to those, and maybe from our legal officer whether that's appropriate. Or
Thank you, Councillor. What I'll do first, if that's all right, I'll go straight to Steve.
And I have one other thing to say afterwards about one of the conditions. That's all. I'll come after.
Just as a point to weight, the issue of weight is an issue for members. And it's a question of what weight you give to material considerations and policy. But I think with regards to the majority of what you've asked, say for weight, are questions for Arwell as opposed to anything as to how he's assessed it as part of his report.
So in terms of the consultation response received from the landscape advice from Essex Council, so I'm not sure, was that the original consultation response? Because during the application process, the applicant produced additional visual receptor points and assessed those. So, but in terms of within my report, it does acknowledge that there are impacts. So I've said this evening from my summary sheet, there are visual impacts. So in terms of that receptor point is where someone is standing, your exposure to that view. So if you are, for example, on this path here, although it's a diverted path right through, the solar panels are coming, there's a little bit of sort of species-rich grassland here, screened by hedging. But I think my report is seeking to provide a balance between recognizing that the closer you are to an object, if you're immersed within the solar farm here, or if you're 2 miles away across from the Crouch, where you saw that LVIA with an arrow that was sort of like this and showing the site to the right. So my report recognises that there are definitely visual impacts, and it comes down to, I would say probably there's about 20 pages in my report that comes down to the planning balance. And the report that I wrote for Great Wheatley Solar Farm, there was a lot in there within the planning balance. I'm looking at, sort of not weekly, but I'm looking at previous appeal decisions, the way that inspectors apply the planning balance. And I believe that I've applied the planning balance from my own professional judgments in line with sort of key considerations, taking into account EN1, EN3, and there is conflict. There's definitely certainly a visual conflict here, but I've had to take account of the wide. I know that Rochford Council has got this target and maybe it's exceeded, but if I'm in an appeal situation defending a refusal, I'm thinking, well, policy N1 and EN3, everything is leaning towards putting greater weighting on the national interest more than the localized effects, because the LVIA does recognize there are cumulative effects. And that's the problem. There is definitely cumulative visual effects, but it's not felt over a 7-mile wide area or a 50-mile wide area. It's still relatively localized. And I've placed more within the planning balance on the national interest.
Councillor Hoy.
Yeah, could I just come back then for the understanding, because that is what Mr. Evans says in paragraph 2.79. So whereas the LVIA is quite critically in some areas, so it's quite high harm. you're saying because it's not felt over a wider area, you don't agree with the specifics of the report, but you think over a wider area, the mitigation is that it's not as great a harm. Am I?
I'm not debating what the LVIA concludes, and there were additional visual receptor points produced. So I'm not debating with the professional view that was drawn in the LVIA because it's done to the Landscape Institute standards. I think that some parts of the effect of it at close range has been downplayed a little bit. And what I'm saying is that at close range, those effects from a visual, what you're seeing at close range, it is quite significant. You can't get away from that fact. But because the effect is sort of, if you were in the middle of this patch here, shall we say, in the middle of this patch here, and there was a network of open fields, a bit like along Airport Runway, and it was a 7-mile wide area here, because there's interspersed with hedges and things, that the visual impact, there's other things that break up the views, if you like, from long range. So you're not, from the crouch, you are definitely going to see a number of solar farms to varying degrees. But what I'm saying is that it's still relative to what could be a very large scale. It is large scale, but if it was even larger scale, the effect would be greater. And I've basically weighed up what is certainly, from certain points within that site and outside it, there's definitely visual impacts, agree 100%. But on a larger scale, they are relatively localised and not seen over a 50-mile wide area. I think that was what I was trying to conclude in the report, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hoy.
Okay, thank you. I understand. I might not agree, but I understand. The other point was in the conditions, which I think is number 5 or 6. I'm on the wrong page at the moment. I will get there. For the working hours, limit, so it's condition 6. We're allowing work on a Sunday. Generally in our planning applications, we don't include Sunday working. I'm just wondering if it's appropriate if we could change that condition to exclude the words and Sunday.
I had some discussion about this. So this is a pretty standardised condition. It was used in the Wheatley Farm appeal decision, but however, I do acknowledge that the site characteristics are different here because you have got obviously residential developments here. So actually, I would acknowledge that one condition doesn't fit all. So I think it's up to members to take a view as to, I think generally, the definition of amenity is the conditions one reasonably expect to enjoy. And I think generally planning conditions on industrial uses to solar farms is to do with when are people likely to be in bed or asleep or expecting a little bit of peace and quiet. So I think there's a duration of X amount that's going to be going over. That is a pretty standardised condition. It's been used in lots of appeal decisions. But I think, as an officer, I'm open for members to decide themselves. What I would just remind, and Birkitts would come in on this, is that, applying the key test of the old circular, unambiguously precise, reasonable in all events related to planning, does it achieve a planning function? I think that is probably, if that is the only question that I would have but I think if members were satisfied that the condition met all the guidance on the use of planning conditions as it's now in the planning practice, then I think it's up to members to decide what that condition should look like.
Okay, thank you. 1 second, please. The meeting has now lasted roughly 2 hours. I'd like to move a motion without notice in line with Committee Procedure Rule 9N to extend this meeting for as long as necessary in order to complete the business. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Stanley, thank you. Could we have a show of hands, please? It's unanimous. Sorry, I do apologise. Can we have a show of hands, please? 4 for 4. That's 12-4. Where were we? Can we carry on, please? Councillor Hoy?
Can I propose that then as an amendment to the condition 6 that the we remove the last two words of the first paragraph, and Sunday, and the last two words of the third paragraph, which are also end Sunday, so that the working will only be Monday to Friday, 7:30 to 6:30 and 8:30 to 1 o'clock Saturday.
So just to clarify, would that be the same as just excluding Sunday, so the condition remains the
Yes,
same?
it would. I
Excluding
did it a very
Sunday?
complicated way.
Yeah. I think that in comments, I think the way the condition is worded is it does give a little bit of respite on Saturday and Sundays, doesn't it, in terms of recognising that on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon it starts a bit later. But I think the position is that, you know, that there are quite a lot of residential properties in sort of plotlands up here, isn't there? So as long as I say, as members think it's reasonable, then the only thing that we have to ask ourselves is, which is absolutely fine, is if they were to appeal against that condition, you know, and that is something that the developer can do, and we can let someone else decide on that. So I as an office, I don't think it's unreasonable that you're suggesting what you're suggesting.
Sorry, Chairman, could I just add that we have planning applications which have been passed in the not too distant past, where we've excluded Sunday working from the...
I actually believe on this occasion that will not be a problem.
So
That's what I'm saying. Councillor Stanley, you're seconding that? Yep.
Sorry, I'll second that, Chair.
So we'll go to the vote. Can we have vote for? Oh, I do apologise. Councillor Shaw, were you going to actually speak on that?
Yeah, I would like to actually have an amendment to that and have no working on over bank holidays. Public holidays, no.
Can we have an amendment and then no working on Sunday or public holidays? Councillor Stanley?
Agreed.
Can we go for the vote then? All those for? Councillor Wilson, are you going to be speaking on the motion?
Actually, thank you, Chair. Just for clarity to help me to decide which one I'm going to vote, if we exclude Sundays and public holidays, will that extend the actual amount of time that there will be disruption to the local residents? And does that also mean that the temporary traffic lights that will be needed as it goes through the road will still be in place? Thank you.
I understand that won't extend the work. So can we go to the vote? All those in favour of this motion? On the conditions.
Chairman, just for the
Just for clarification,
just for the benefit of the person taking the minutes, can I read out what I've understood that members have agreed then? So there's no construction or decommissioning work shall take place except between the following hours of 7:30 to 18:30 Monday to Friday and 8:30 to 1300 on a Saturday. And then no construction or decommissioning works, that wording, shall take place on Sundays or on any public holiday. Is that correct?
that is correct.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Any public holidays in England? Can we go to the vote? Councillor Eaves, you want to talk on the motion?
The motion. I thought we passed the motion.
Sorry.
So I wanted to actually pick up on something that was pulled out earlier on, because there is general concern. I actually work in Canewden Road, and I know that has the potential to be extremely dangerous. I'm wondering if there is, I'm asking the question, I'm wondering if there is any mileage in requesting a deferment for the contractor to actually explore the possibility of taking the connection across the fields rather than the roads. It seems rather an obvious thing. If we see the actual oversight of the actual area, there does seem to be a natural area across fields that it could go.
Can I just clarify that point again? Because I actually believe the work on the roads was going to be limited.
When the client came up, or the proposer, the company came up, representative came up, he said it would be up to 6 months with traffic control down there on a narrow road. That is introducing danger, and I think as members, that where we are representing the safety of our residents, that is something that is worth considering.
Can I just clarify something, Marek, please?
The quickest and easiest way that they can, at least.
Can I just clarify? for
Stephen.
members? Obviously, this is the application that's before you. We can't redraft the application proposal that the applicant has put forward. In terms of the works that are going to take place in the highway, that's subject to a separate regime. What we're here to do is to approve or reject the development that's being proposed here that requires the planning permission. We can't go further into what Essex County Council are going to do with the road, etc., because that will be done. And once it's done, that's finished. That cable's going to be in there, and that's the development.
Councillor Reeve.
Thank you, Chair. My concern is that, yes, okay, once it's in there, but the aggravation it's going to actually present to our residents and the danger it's going to present to our residents is real. Okay, I understand that this isn't part of the application. Maybe Councillor Shaw, in her position of Deputy at Highways, can assure us that that will actually get considered for alternative options when it comes to it. It's something that I think it's a real concern.
Can I comment on that, Chair?
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Mrs.
I
Shaw.
cannot actually comment on that until this application has been either approved or,
I believe that was the case.
yeah, I cannot comment on that. Thank you.
Stephen.
Yeah, just to add in, Essex County Council are the highway authority and responsible for the safety in the highway. So that's their obligation. If somebody gets injured in the highway as a result or something else, they're going to be suing Essex County Council. Essex County Council will not put themselves in that situation. They'll be well organised traffic regulation orders, temporary, to sort this development out if it is granted. Don't worry, they'll be more than adequate because it's under a separate piece of legislation. And Essex, I imagine, wouldn't want any problems with regard to the public using the highway. So we're here to deal with the development as proposed. Essex County Council will deal with the safety of the highway while those works are taking place. That's our job is the development. Their job is the highway. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Can we, before we go any further, we've actually got a motion which we're voting on, which, oh, well, if you could read, we've done it. I do apologise. I obviously missed the last bit. 1 second. Councillor Stanley then.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to bring the attention of the committee to 7.15, where page 7.15, sorry, just above 1.13. The height of these solar panels will be approximately 3 metres. There will be CCTV poles at 3 metres, not at 2 metres, at 3 metres to look over the site. This visually impairs the whole area of the site to other areas, being the church and also to the Crouch. And to top this, the concrete that's being used outweighs what we're trying to achieve. They're producing concrete to stabilise the apparatus in the ground, and yet we're trying to get away from using concrete as a carbon
Sorry,
neutrality.
Councillor Stanley, can you show me where you're referring to regarding the concrete element?
It says there that the site will be from its ground level to its top of each solar panel, and it will have concrete bases to put those solar panels on stanchions. So it will be 3 metres high. And if you're walking, I'm only 6 foot. So if I'm walking down a pathway, all I'm going to see is the best part of a solar panel. I don't want to see a solar panel. I want to see the view.
That's the foundation for the transformer.
Foundation, sorry, that's the foundation,
It's just the
concrete
transformer
foundation.
station, not the solar panel.
No, and it's the solar.
No, it's not.
Yeah, but they have to be in concrete.
Sorry, Councillor Stanley, what is your question? Or what is your...
My question is the visibility of the surrounding areas when you've got 3
Right,
metre high.
Thank you.
solar panels.
Well, can you come in on that, please?
I'm not clear within the report where within the report Councillor Stanley's reading from. Can you clarify?
Can you clarify that again, Councillor Stanley?
Sorry, 7.15, sorry, people. And the 1.13, and if you read down that page, the height of the solar panels is 3 metres. They are, if you like, put in concrete bases that the stanchions are in. They're not just poled into the ground, they're put in concrete. And also your CCTV cameras will be at least 3 metres to look over the whole area. And you have fencing at 2.1 metres high, which will stop any natural deer or anything wandering through the premises. They won't be able to wander through. You're creating a barrier for wildlife, and it's just totally wrong. Thank you.
Oh, well, can you come back on that, please?
Well, I think at the top of page 7.15, there's reference to the DNO, which is the direct distribution network operator. I can see where it says about the DNO substation, but I think in terms of the construction of the solar panel itself, it's not specifying that those are sunk in concrete because they could be piled in. Within the design access statement, there was a couple of options that were cited within that. But if they're sunk in concrete, the concrete's going to be beneath the ground, or if they're piled in, there's going to be no concrete, minimum concrete. So, it is as read there. I can't sort of say it's nothing other than there, but I can't see quite where Councillor Stanley's reading it from.
No, Councillor Cross, hold on a second. Sorry, well, can you finish?
It is as read there, but from where Councillor Stanley was starting, I'm reading things that relate to the DNO substation, and then it mentions further down, the cameras. It does say, doesn't it, at 1.17, it says the CCTV poles will be at 3 metres. It does say that, but I'm not getting within the report where there's this reference to concrete and the foundations of the solar panels.
Bear with me a second. Councillor Cross, is this in relation to this item?
Yes, it is, Chairman. I think Councillor Stanley is slightly confused. This is referring to the transformer stations having concrete foundations, and there's 15 of those. The solar panels, as I understand it, don't have concrete foundations. They're staked into the ground.
Thank you, Councillor Cross. Councillor Stanley, does that satisfy your answer?
Partially. Thank you.
Councillor Mr Shaw. Councillor Page. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just wondering if we can make it a condition that the routing of the high voltage cable from the transformer substation is a direct A to B to the pylon network rather than using the road. That seems to me a more logical step. So if we make it a condition that they use the shortest route, A to B, across the field.
No, we can't change the condition. We can't add that condition. We can't change the application.
Oh, okay.
Chairman, can I propose we move to the vote?
I'm just doing that, Mr Hoy. Councillor Hoy.
Condition 6, Chairman, amended condition 6.
We will now proceed to move the motion from the chair. The planning permission to be approved subject to section 106 to secure off-site skylark mitigation and subject to the following conditions set out on pages 7.2 to 7.9 of the report with an amended condition. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Hoy. We go straight to the vote. Those in favour, raise your hands for. Those against? Abstentions? That motion is passed. 8 for, 3 against, 2 abstentions. Firstly, I apologise for my confusion before. That concludes our business for this evening. Thank you all for your attending. The meeting closes at 21:48.